Today we're going to do something that I've wanted to do for a long time. Drive the Miata, S2000, and BRZ back to back. Spent a lot of time in the ND Miata. I've driven a few S2000s in my time, and I owned a 2014 Subaru BRZ. Let's talk briefly about these cars, and we'll go for a drive and see what they're like on the road, and then we'll just kind of discuss what do these sports cars mean if you have $20,000 to $30,000 and you want something that's fun, either to race, enjoy on the weekends, daily drive. How do they stack up against each other? What's the most fun to drive? What's the most practical? What's the best value? Should you get a new Miata with a lot of tech and comfort and luxury and features? Can you even fit in the new Miata? That's a question. Or should you get an S2000? Values are going up on these. It's a very solid buy. These S2000s are quickly becoming modern classics. Legendary engine and transmission. Just a phenomenal car to drive. This one here is an AP1. It's an 03. It has just shy of 100,000 miles on it. It's a very, very good car. Or the BRZ. This is kind of the practical choice. You have rear seats. You have a lot of interior room. It's economical. It's very fuel efficient. It's reasonably affordable. And of course, on all these cars, consumables are going to be pretty low. So you're not going to have a lot of maintenance. They're all very reliable. The BRZ and the Miata are top two on Consumer Reports' most reliable list, which is pretty impressive. And the S2000, it's a pretty old car at this point, but still, you're not really going to need to do much besides oil changes, regular maintenance items, and the occasional valve adjustment on these things. So first, let's talk about this BRZ. This is a 2017 performance package. So we've got the massive Brembo brakes on here. This car has lighter weight, slightly wider Enkei PF01 wheels, 17x8s on the stock tire. And we have a couple mods under the hood. We have a TRD intake and a full parent exhaust, header all the way back. So we've got a little bit more power. This does get rid of the torque dip. That header does a lot of work. It's a catted header, and it's matched with a tune. So that means we've got a little bit more horsepower. It has that new intake manifold. It's a pretty solid car. And this is a 2018, so it has Apple CarPlay, which I think for a daily driver is the way to go. The S2000. 2003, this has just shy of 100,000 miles on it. No major mods. It has Bilstein PSS coilovers and an intake. Otherwise, it's pretty much stock. It's got these aftermarket wheels, a little bit lighter. 17x8s in the front, 17x9s in the rear. The ND Miata. This is a grand touring car, so it's $35,000. A little bit more expensive than the other two, but you can get an ND1 or an ND2 that's a couple years old for about the same price as you can pick up a BRZ or an S2000. So we'll say pricing, it's all about the same. This thing is probably about as close to the S2000 performance-wise as it gets. This new ND2 puts out 181 horsepower, 151 pound-feet of torque, and it revs to the moon. It really gets up there. It's got the same feel, high revving nature of the S2000, whereas the BRZ is a little bit lazier. It's really lightweight, just shy of 2,400 pounds, but they've shaved a lot of car off to get to that low weight number. This is a tight interior. It's very cramped. There's not a lot of room for people over 5'10", 5'11". There's a conundrum. You either have your back seat comfort or your leg seat comfort, and I don't know, it's kind of a tough one. The one we have here today is an RF. This is the folding hardtop. If I were just getting a Miata to enjoy as on the weekend, take it to the track occasionally, this is what I would swing for. The soft top is great. It has stiffer suspension, but this folding hardtop is just so much more livable, comfortable, and I think it looks better. Personally, though, my money would go towards the hardtop RF Miata if I were going to get one. You kind of can't go wrong with any of these cars. They're all fantastic options. They're all about the same price. They all follow the same philosophy. I think the BRZ is probably the only odd man out here, but you can get any of these cars, except for maybe the S2000 is up until recently, for as low as 15 grand, 10 grand. I mean, you can get an NC Miata for about that, or an older Miata, and even the ND1s are around 20 or so. So you can pick up a decent S2000 for around $20,000, a really clean one, a really nice one. It's going to be over 30 grand now. They're getting up there. This BRZ was around 22, 23,000 bucks. Pretty low mileage. It's got a lot of cool TS parts on the inside. It's actually owned by a Toyota engineer. Blacked out the interior. You've got the red seat belts. Pretty nicely spec'd car. They did a really nice job with this. And it has C Quartz 3.0, so this is about as slippery as it gets as far as paint and clear coat go. All right, enough talking. Let's go drive these cars. We'll start with the BRZ.
Earmarks, oh my.
Well, home sweet home. This is a familiar place. It's been a while since I've driven a BRZ. As many of you know, I had a 2014 for 6 years. Really enjoyed it, really loved that car, and it's good to get back behind the wheel of this 2018 performance package. In my opinion, these are the best BRZs to get, the 2017 Plus ones and the 2018 Plus that come with Apple CarPlay, if you can really swing the extra cash. The OEM standard suspension in this car is just about perfect. You've got the standard tires that give you just a little bit less grip, a little bit more fun, and honestly, I would swap them out for grippier tires. Lets you slide it around a little bit, have a bit of fun. It's the way to go. And what really makes this BRZ nice to drive is that it has just a little bit more power. That full exhaust, especially the catted header and the tune, completely get rid of that torque dip. And all you pretty much need in the car like this is a linear power band. So what's this BRZ like to drive? Well, it's good. It's very satisfying. It's very smooth. The shifter, the relationship between the pedals, the way the clutch engages and disengages. It's a very direct and enjoyable driving experience. This is one of the best and most satisfying manual transmissions to drive in any modern sports car, just because it's fun. You can rev match very easily. There's a really positive feel from the shifter. And this one just sounds the business. This full exhaust makes all the right noises. These performance pack Brembos bite really hard with just incredible pedal feel. But let's not kid anyone, this is the most practical grown-up car of the bunch. The other two are complete hoons, and this is a little bit more reserved and I'd say refined. This is a car that you can take on a long road trip and not get beaten up. The seats are exceedingly comfortable. There's enough room on the interior for someone up to 6'4", 6'5". I have friends who are incredibly tall who daily drive and love their BRZs, and they fit great in them. That is one positive with this car. The Miata, the ND, forget about it. You're over 6 foot, you're not going to be comfortable in that car at all. You're over 5'10" or 5'11", you're not going to be comfortable in that car. So that's a pretty limiting factor. The NC is a lot larger, and the NAs and NBs have a little bit more room in them too. This new ND Miata is very tight. The S2000, kind of the same story. You're over 6 foot, you're going to be uncomfortable. If you just need one car, this is it. This gives you the sports car feel, the enjoyment, the everyday practicality. You can fit a mountain bike in the rear if you take the front wheel off. Pretty amazing. 4 tires fit in the back if you want to take it out to a track day. When I had my BRZ, I had 4 different sets of wheels and tires. One for winter, one for drifting, one for track days, one for just long road trips. If you're looking for outright thrills, this delivers, but not nearly as well as the S2000 or Miata. It feels a little bit heavier, less athletic, not as chuckable, so to say. But if you're going to buy a car to learn how to drive rear-wheel drive in and improve as a driver, this is the most forgiving car here. The Miata, limit handling is a bit of a knife edge, and the S2000 even more so, that being a front mid-engine car. This BRZ, it almost drifts and slides itself. It's pretty awesome. I learned to really get the most out of rear-wheel drive in my 2014 BRZ, and it was fantastic to learn the platform, to learn a rear-wheel drive sports car platform with a pretty big margin of safety. After I got better at driving, I kind of got a little bit bored with it, but I think it'll last you a long time. There's a lot of modifications you can do to these cars. Pretty much all I would do though, keep it pretty standard, do a little bit more power with a tune and an unequal length header or something, and call it a day. The suspension tuning, especially in these 2017 pluses, is just about perfect. They look great, they sound great, they're reliable, they're efficient. They are awesome daily drivers. I'm very excited to see what the next generation BRZ is like to drive. A little bit wider, a little bit faster, and I think it'll have a better power to weight ratio than the Miata. It's obvious, but the BRZ also, you can't take the roof off. This is a coupe. They didn't come out with a convertible. They had a little concept for a minute that they teased us at an auto show or two, but for the most part, this is just a standard coupe. It's stiffer and better for it, I think. In the real world, the power difference between any of these cars isn't really going to show up. You'll find out on track what is quicker pretty quickly, and the Miata will walk that, and the Miata and the S2000 I think will be pretty comparable. The great thing about this BRZ is that it's predictable. It is so easy to place, so easy to drive and slide around. The ride quality is excellent. I mean, this is, like I said at the beginning, a very comfortable and easy car to live with. You could daily this thing, no problem. You get excellent gas mileage on the highway. I usually average around 34 to 33, and combined at least 28 or 29 miles to the gallon. It does take premium fuel, but I think they kind of all do, except for the Miata. Miata requires it, but you don't need to put premium in it. It's fine. Sounds so good. When the BRZ and FRS came out in 2013, I thought to myself that this powertrain, this Subaru Boxer engine with a 6-speed manual and a limited slip diff, is just going to be the perfect sports car formula. And it turned out to be as good, if not a little bit better, than I thought it would be. It's just such an enjoyable package. All right, well, I think that sums up the BRZ. Again, I've done dozens and dozens of videos on this car. You guys probably all have a pretty good idea of my thoughts with it. Take a couple corners here. What a pleasure. I like this parent exhaust. It's subtle, it's kind of muted. BRZs are well known for making a lot of noise and not going very fast. It doesn't detract too much from the experience. This might be the slowest car between the bunch, and as a result, the one car you can really enjoy a lot on the street without getting into too much trouble. The Miata, unfortunately, that's no longer the case. That is a quick car, and you have to kind of hold back a little bit. You have to be careful. Subarus don't sound like this anymore too. It's so great that you can get that unequal length header noise with a sub $1,000 header. I would go catted with your unequal length header. Otherwise, uncatted, it's too loud. It's too much unless you have a stock exhaust or stock muffler on there. I'm getting old, so my FT86 Speed Factory catted UEL was bolted onto the stock cat back, and that was pretty perfect for me. All right, guys. Well, that'll sum up the BRZ. All right, let's ride this S2000. This is what I've been waiting for all day. Such a cool startup sequence too. Amazing car, just amazing. So this is an AP1, 240 horsepower, 2-liter VTEC engine from Honda, 9,000 RPM redline. Doesn't get exciting until after $6,000, which is where most cars stop. The engine is set so far behind the front axle that it's actually technically a mid-engine car, front mid-engine. One of the best 6-speed manual transmissions in the business. It's sharp, it's crisp. The coilovers make a big difference. Getting the suspension right in these cars is a big deal. I think all we're going to be hearing in this video is BRZ. One of the best mods you can do to an S2000 is just throw in a cold air intake. Gives you a lot of cool induction noise and sounds awesome. And this S2000 is all about the sound. We're gonna let it warm up for a couple minutes here and we'll get into VTEC. Just cruising here at speed. I'm very comfortable. Ride quality is nice on these Bilsteins. Not a lot of wind buffeting either. With the windows up, it's very comfortable. 55, 60 miles an hour. No problems with this as a convertible. And this is the way to drive this car. You do not want to be in an S2000 with the top up. Not only is it sacrilegious, but it's not that fun. Such a great powertrain. It's funny because all these cars are basically the same. 4-cylinder, Japanese, rear-wheel drive, 2-door. The BRZ has a couple extra seats thrown in, is about 10 inches longer, but it's the same formula, but they all do different things. Almost 20 years later, this S2000 still feels fresh. 94,000 miles, and granted this one's been really well cared for and really well looked after, but it just drives so well. If there was a car that was connected to your brain, this is it. It's telepathic and how it communicates. Like the BRZ, all of your inputs are so well synced. Have your morning coffee, just rub your S2000 to 9,000 RPM when you get up in the morning and go for a drive. Just amazing. That induction noise, the intake, the shifter, all of it just, it was designed to thrill. And these AP1 cars are just sensational. That 9,000 RPM, this is how the S2000 was designed. I've heard great things about the AP2s, but for some reason they've just never quite thrilled me like an AP1 does. that BRZ sounds good. I mean, this is as close to a race car engine as it gets. $6,000, VTEC kicks in and it comes on cam. It has two personalities. Relatively tame, boring Honda. And then Maniac. So, the best engine, the best shifter. The steering is always been a little bit wonky to me in the S2000. It's an E-Pass system, and it's an early one. There were not a lot of sports cars running around with electronic power steering back in the early 2000s, and this is one of the first. Given that it is electronic, it's pretty good. It has a decent amount of feel. It's not as communicative as the Miata. I don't think it's as communicative as the BRZ. And this car is a little bit more on a knife edge. You have to approach corners with caution. If you get into the power and you get the rear end out a little bit, you gotta stay into it. You gotta treat this like a mid-engine car. And again, I'm not terribly comfortable driving S2000s. I don't have as much seat time as Jackie Ding or anyone like that, so I'm not gonna be sliding this thing around today, but with the right suspension setup, you can really dial in the handling on these cars. The power here is just phenomenal. Definitely the fastest car here. And the way VTEC kicks in all at once makes it all the more dramatic. If all you want is sheer thrills, this is your car. It's simple, it's really well made. I don't think you could do much better in anything besides a Porsche Boxster or Porsche Cayman. And even then, I think this is more enjoyable. It's like there's just a bunch of trumpets under the hood. And I would argue this car is still enjoyable to drive slowly just because of how good the shifter is. Compare this to the Miata. There's so much better visibility. This is such a more open top experience. Of course, the RF has this whole roof situation in the back that really hinders visibility. The cloth top Miata, I will admit, is a lot better in terms of visibility, but this S2000 it really is a nice balance of visibility, size, ergonomics. Everything is driver focused and driver centric. And one thing I love about this S2000 is it's still a comfortable car to drive in the winter. I love it when sports car companies make convertibles a little bit more user-friendly for the cold weather months. There's a guy in Detroit, he's pretty infamous for driving around the Metro Detroit area in his S2000 in January or February. You'll see him with the top down. He's bundled up, but he's got the heat cranked in this thing, and he's perfectly comfortable. There's an air curtain in this S2000 that kind of envelops you. This S2000 to me is just about perfect. It's on coilovers. You've got a really nice ride handling balance. Again, this is Michigan. We don't have a ton of corners to test this thing around, but stock engine, a little bit of an intake for some extra noise and power, catback exhaust. It adds up to such a nice package. Surprisingly quick, it really creeps up there. I've always said that besides something like a GT3, this is in my top 5 cars, 5 favorite sports cars that I've ever driven. It's this along with a Shelby Cobra replica, a Factory 5 Cobra, GT3, and I don't know, maybe a Ferrari or something. Yeah, the suspension here feels dialed. Very predictable. All the modifications, all the add-ons on these cars are listed in the description. How much do you want for it?
Shut up. I knew it was going to do what you asked.
Oh my gosh.
How bad is it getting out of this and getting into that?
I mean, this is just the best car here. I mean, the BRZ is great, but it's like,
It's still very super. Anyway, are you good on footage?
I'm good with the S2000. Yeah.
Been in the cam a few times?
Oh, a few times.
God, it sounds so good.
It's just trumpets of glory.
Yeah, we'll talk more.
Yeah. Anyway, if it wasn't obvious during the drive, this is my favorite car here. I am completely biased, and the S2000 always kind of has been the one that I've wanted, that I've really favored internally. But for practical reasons, I did buy a BRZ, and that served me really well. But if you just want thrills, you'd be missing out to get them only in a BRZ if you have another car to do daily driver duty. Honda just did an amazing job with this car. I don't think I've ever driven anything quite like it. The Miata is close, but it doesn't really hold a candle to the sophistication and just the specialness of this S2000. Nothing like this will ever get made again. It is definitely a special vehicle in the history of automotive culture and just this genre of front engine, rear wheel drive, reasonably powered, high revving sports cars, which are my favorite type of sports cars. I'm gonna put this in first, is that okay?
Yeah, always.
Always, okay. And then key off.
Key off.
Never press the engine start button to turn off an S2000. It'll grind the starter against the flywheel, and your friend or whoever is letting you drive their S2000 won't be happy. Or you won't be happy as an owner, and you'll never do it again. All right, let's go drive the Miata. Till we meet again. Yeah, so clean. Just, this thing drives so well. I drove it when it had 50,000 miles on it, and it feels the same with another 40.
Everybody I talk to who drives these cars comments on how solid they always feel.
Until you put the top up, but
Yeah, and then it's a rattly, crappy, terrible car.
yeah.
Tinny,
But with the
garbagey.
top down, I mean, Honda has done some work to make it a comfortable top-down experience. And, I mean, you've committed. You've got the cover on here. It'd probably take you 10 minutes to put the top up on this, and why bother, you know?
And most S2000 owners, they throw that cover away
Yeah.
because it's useless. And I only put it on for this video, and actually I had to clean about 7 layers of dust off it.
Okay.
It's terrible to take on and off, and it takes up nearly half the trunk. So most folks, they just run without it.
What is trunk space like in this thing?
Not too bad. It's probably equivalent to like an NC Miata or a regular ND Miata.
Because it's kind of deep, isn't it?
Yep, it's got the well down
Oh, yeah.
there in the bottom.
This is more than the ND for sure.
So
That's pretty
probably
good.
more like an NC.
Yeah, you could fit a couple weekend bags in here, no problem. And this is the next car. It's got to be. Thrills per dollar, nothing beats this S2000.
No, I mean, even at the prices they're going for now, I couldn't justify, you know, when you say a clean one of these is, an AP1 is $20,000 to $25,000 right now. You know, you can get a BRZ and it's perfect daily. It's something more and it's something special.
Yeah.
When you drive it hard, it feels special. When I drive this hard, it feels like a fun car.
It's fun, yeah. You know, I gotta say, for me, the Miata's third place here.
I actually think so too.
It's great. It really gives you all the inputs and the thrills and the speed, but it's a little bit numb. Whereas the BRZ has more practicality.
The steering was not very good in
know, the Miata steering has always been its weak point. The Fiata had better steering.
And these
The BRZ has better
bad
steering. The S2000 is kind of wonky. And this is E-Pass, right?
Correct.
It's early E-Pass.
Yeah, that was the big complaint about them when they came out. But you know, lowering it, going to coilovers, being a little more aggressive on the alignment, I think has allowed you to enjoy the steering.
I took
more.
one good turn in this at speed, just because of the route, and the suspension feels awesome.
It's
When I get my S2000, I'm doing the same suspension. It feels great.
the
It's really dialed in.
setup this is kind of anecdotal, but I've heard it's very similar to the CR suspension. Like the rears
That's what you
actually
want.
have a remote reservoir,
Yeah.
and so you still have travel. Probably my big complaint, my big fear about going to a coilover setup when you see a lot of the lesser or cheaper coilovers is that you're trading suspension travel and ride comfort, which it's still pretty comfortable.
It's fine. It feels great. Yeah.
You know, and that's it. Actually, I find it to be just as comfortable as the BRZ, honestly.
I mean, with the top down, it's fine. It's great. I mean, you're not going to daily this car. It's probably a little bit too low. You have, but I mean, I guess you could if you were a little bit younger and a little bit crazier. But
I was.
yeah, yeah.
So now I've matured and bought a Subaru. There you go.
But the Miata, I don't know, it just leaves me a little bit numb. It's a really good. I think the Miata is the closest modern interpretation of this, but it's still like it. I just want a little bit more
motor's
feel.
Still a little flat, especially when you compare it to this or
Yeah.
that on the Tune. It just doesn't. For me, it doesn't provide the sensation you get in this. This is
Yeah.
much more visceral.
The
Now,
chassis
this
is
much
excellent.
less isolated,
Oh yeah,
right? And so that's
Yep.
part of that. You know, it is louder.
you're getting
It's-
modern safety, modern levels of NVH, and
yeah,
just
trade-offs.
yeah,
And you know, that's something to think about on this. Like, this has 2 airbags.
sure.
You know, like if you're really safety conscious, go buy a BRZ. That's I've seen those cars hold up in crashes really well.
5-star safety ratings. Yeah,
And they're just, those have all of the bells and whistles airbag wise. They're also a little bigger and heavier, which regardless of whether the Miata's got the same number of airbags or same safety rating, if you're going to get hit by something larger, which in a Miata you're always going to get hit by something larger, you're probably going to want a BRZ on that front. Having a hard roof and having that whole structure is just going to be safe.
there's a lot to say about that. Yeah, and if you're going to get a Miata, the RF is probably the safer option. Probably got the hardtop too for track days, which makes things getting into some of them a little bit easier, but
Yep.
more difficult to actually put a roll bar in there.
Yeah. They've nailed the looks on the car.
It looks awesome. I think it looks great. Yeah.
It really does. It's very eye-catching. I mean, it catches as many looks as either of these, that's
Yeah.
for sure. So,
I'm going to drive the Miata.
I'm taking my baby.
All right, I'll follow you and listen to the S2000. We're going to do part of this video with the roof down and part of it with the roof up. So, getting into the Miata, first thing I'm noticing, much lighter inputs than any of these other cars. The S2000, you have to put a little bit of muscle into the shifter. The steering's a little bit heavier. The BRZ, same way. The shifter takes some effort. The steering is a little bit more weighted. Everything in this Miata is very light, very flickable, and very representative of how much the car weighs. So as a result, this feels a little bit happier, a little bit more, I don't know, playful than the other cars. It's lighter on its feet, but it's also a little bit number. I don't have nearly as much steering feel, but it's still the right formula. Lightweight, rear-wheel drive, finally a good amount of power in this car. It feels awesome. It drives great. Does it thrill as much as the S2000 or the BRZ? I would say in terms of enjoyment and driving fun, it's a lot closer to the BRZ than I thought it would be. The S2000 is honestly just in another league. And as you can see there, the S2000 will walk away from the ND Miata. The 240 horsepower on that car does go a long way. So, after a couple of caveats, if you fit in the Miata, if you want to pay $35,000 for a new one, or a little bit less for a used one. This is a really nice convertible. The RF is a lot more livable and comfortable. The ride quality is excellent compared to the soft top. You get the BBS, the Brembo package, the club, whatever Miata you get, it doesn't matter. Just get a limited slip. That's all I advise. This is definitely the torquiest car here. It is a super wide power band. Doesn't really come on cam like the BRZ or the S2000 does in the high revs, but it's a very linear power band. Very quick, a lot of performance here. And that's something great about this new ND Miata is that if you're looking for a track car, this would be a pretty good performer. You throw some good suspension on here, really big, sticky, grippy tires, and you will have a pretty capable car that's going to be chasing down a lot of higher powered vehicles. You're ever in a track day, there's always a little Miata tailgating you in your rearview mirror no matter what you're driving, at least around the corners. You'll pull away from them on the straights, but in the corners they'll catch back up to you and want that point by. And if you're doing track days, I would highly recommend the soft top Miata. The suspension is pretty much ready to go for track work. It's a little bit lighter of a package. It's a little bit cheaper, so you've got more room for modifications and cooling mods, so to speak. But really, out of the box, this car doesn't need a whole lot. It's so lightweight, you're not going to be going through tires or brakes. And as standard, the braking system in this car is pretty well suited to track work as it is. You're also going to get amazing fuel economy in this Miata. Mid-30s for MPG. Cruising at speed here, I'm very comfortable, about the same as what I was in the S2000. Granted, we're a little bit more isolated from the elements here with the RF. But not a lot of wind buffeting, not a lot of intrusion from the exterior elements into the cabin. This is another very comfortable convertible to drive. Beautiful rotation. Let me just be clear, you can't go wrong with any one of these cars. They're all going to put a smile on your face. They're all going to be a blast to enjoy and to learn and grow with as a driver. They will all thrill you in ways that few other cars can. And for that, they must all be celebrated. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with this video, is just celebrate these cars because they're so good. Roof up happens pretty quickly. You can raise it at speeds up to 6 miles per hour. And I hear there's a hack that allows you to go a little bit higher. Another one of the best shifters here with this ND2. It's just, the best word I can describe it is snickety. Really, my only knock against this new Miata is that everything's just a little bit numb. The Fiat 124 Spider always had better steering. They improved it with the ND2 Miatas. The power level here is awesome. The chassis is amazing. It gives you all the right feels, all the right dynamic enjoyment around a corner. I think the lightness of all the controls suits the car really well. But driving this after getting out of the other two, I think for me it's between the BRZ and the S2000 for where my money would go and where my money's gone in the past. It's stiff competition because that S2000 is just a legendary car at this point, and it is honestly in a class a little bit higher than these other two cars. It's not entirely a fair comparison. We should be comparing that to like a K&N or something, or a Boxster S. But that's okay. I mean, this is the question, I think, on a lot of people's minds. What do you buy in this category between these few vehicles? I think the answer is go buy something. Keep the sports car pulse alive. Don't grow up too fast. Get out there, enjoy something with the roof off. Take your BRZ to an autocross, to a track day, to a skid pad. Learn how to drift in a safe environment. Oh, the torque here is just fantastic. Again, amazing inputs. Very good pedal setup for heel toe downshifting. Rev matching in this is pretty easy. Like the S2000, this is a bit more of a challenge to drive at the limit. We had this Miata out on track last fall on a very wet and rainy track day, and it was basically just a drift session. But this car has a little bit of a knife edge to it, and I like that because not a lot of cars do anymore. It's one press to turn off the traction control. In the dry, it's pretty approachable, but you get this thing out in the wet, and you have to watch out and be careful. Now, I think perspective is really important when you think about this Miata, because I think this is a really nice budget option for those who want something a little bit more luxurious feeling. They maybe aren't interested in maintaining or having an older car or an older Miata. I mean, this is the highest performance Miata ever made. It's amazing how fast this thing is, and when we did that poll, how close it is to the S2000. The S2000, I think, would still, if you had these on a straightaway and on a racetrack or something, the S2000 would pull a few car lengths away from this Miata. But the torque in this car really does make it feel fast. It almost kind of reminds me of an EcoBoost Mustang. All right, there's the Miata. 3 great cars. Kind of can't go wrong with any one of them. But hopefully this video has given you guys a good idea on what they're like back to back. I mean, each one of these cars does offer something distinctly different. I think the S2000 is definitely my favorite for just driving enjoyment and thrills. But if you want a good track weapon, the Miata is probably the best choice, at least for a modern vehicle with a warranty, with a pretty decent aftermarket. The BRZ is a good choice too, but again, not quite the performance of these other two, but for the practicality, it's probably worth it.
I mean, if you don't have legs, the back seats are great.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And I've fit a couple friends in the back on occasion.
But, you know, so it's interesting you mentioned this because we were debating a lot of cars. And you know, we've got the truck, the SUV. And I was looking at just this huge swath of cars because I wanted something that I could drive every day on a commute that was 100 miles, right? Round trip. Like,
yeah.
I'm going a long way.
That's a long distance.
And I needed something that was decent on gas, was fairly comfortable, was reliable, was newer, was safer. You could really drive in the winter. And I was looking at everything from wide body scat packs and that $45,000 to $50,000 price range.
Yeah, Lexus RCFs,
RCFs,
stuff like that.
I was looking at used RCFs. You can find those kind of just below that, like 40 to 45. I was looking at 370Zs, looking at a few other. Even like C6 Corvettes. I mean, you just can't really drive them in the winter. As fun as they are, they're just not for a Michigan winter, and especially not to commute in like that. But long story short of it, this was the next step down from this would have been an ND Miata used.
Yeah, the seats in this aren't terribly comfortable, and this car does wear on you on long road trips.
They're soft.
But the BRZ, that extra wheelbase, adds a lot of comfort
it's very
on the
stable
highway.
On the highway.
Very stable.
I actually think of all the cars, that's the best steering.
I would agree. Yeah, the BRZ steering is it's
really
well weighted. You have a good amount of feel.
Part of that is probably that you're on the slightly stretched aftermarket PF01, so you got a little less sidewall.
Sure, that's
stiffer,
right. Yeah.
And so you're probably.
But the BRZ's always had great steering, and the Miata, the new generation of Miatas with the new electronic steering, have always been they've left a little bit to be desired. The S2000, kind of the same story. But there are so many other things that are great about that car that give you excellent feedback, mostly just from the engine and the shifter, that it kind of makes up for it, and the steering just fades into the background. But the BRZ, the steering is kind of a highlight because it auto steers too. You get this thing around a corner sideways, and you don't even have to think about where to point it.
Yeah.
It just does it, and it returns to center beautifully.
And I'll actually say the driving position where you sit in the car is the best in this.
In the
You
S2000,
sit
yeah.
tall in the S2000.
You do.
Which is kind of a surprise given the dynamics of the car. The Miata, and it's probably too generationally the kind of how far hold down you are in the vehicle has changed as they've gotten safer, right?
Sure.
So the side, when you get in an NA Miata, it feels like your upper half of your body's sitting outside the car.
Absolutely.
You get in an ND and suddenly you're
in a cocoon.
You're in a bathtub.
Yeah.
Right? You're pretty low.
But
in the
this is a
bathtub.
safe Miata, There's something to be said about that. And same with the BRZ.
Yep.
Yeah.
This still delivers that thrill, and ultimately I drove a Scat wide body. I drove some other things, and this had the practicality factor too. Like I can fit my dog in the back. Right?
Absolutely.
I can go on a long road trip and get 30 miles a gallon. Those are things that, as cool as a wide body Charger is, and driving around a tank, there are downsides to that, right? And this ended up being a really, for now, a compromise package. If my commute gets shorter, I don't have to drive as much in the winter, or something changes, maybe we go back to the Dodge dealer and buy something really dumb in V8 while you kind of still can. But for everything else, we have the SUV, and it is what it is.
Now
So
you've
it
got
works.
the kind of the perfect garage.
It's going well.
I
don't have a
you've done
motorcycle
well.
anymore.
That's
I
okay.
used to have a motorcycle.
This is about as close as it gets with four wheels, I think.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I actually had a Honda motorcycle for
You
a while,
did.
and it's shocking how much the DNA seems to be shared between the two.
Yeah. Anyway, to sum things up,
We're going to sit here and talk about this all night while
I
the
know.
sun sets. It looks really pretty.
Exactly. No, thanks for letting me come out and driving
Sure,
these two. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and hopefully all you guys enjoyed this too, because this is kind of a bucket list item to drive all three of these back to back. Really kind of compare and from the seat of the pants what they're like to drive. And for me it's S2000, but I knew that going in, and I am hugely biased because I want one. And I'm not helping my case. This video is going to make values go up even more,
Yeah,
probably.
you're not, you should buy first, then post this.
Then I'll
That
upload
would be- this. That'll be the intro. Well, guys, now that I bought, so there you go.
On that note, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.
Cheers.